American soccer is weird here on on morning kick around. And what I was trying to say, a major league soccer team has been sold. To talk about that, valuations of teams, and maybe a little bit of USL. We've got special guest Simon Evans, U.S. sports correspondent for AFP and the host of The Soccer Business. Simon Evans, welcome to Morning Kick Around, sir.
Good to see you again, guys. How you doing?
Yeah, reoccurring guest.
Yeah, maybe one of the first. I can't remember if we've had somebody else come back.
Second.
Second reoccurring guest, but good to have Simon back. Appreciate your time, Simon. Yes, I reached out to Simon because Real Salt Lake has been sold, and what you'll see in the headlines is that Real Salt Lake has been sold for $600 million, but that's not exactly the story, right, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, if we break down that figure, that's a number that's come out through the media. We know how that works. It's not the official number. They don't give away the official number. No one sees the contract. But, you know, when every outlet reports 600 million, it's usually somebody's given a nod somewhere down the line that you're not far away. You're not far away with that. So let's work with that 600 million. That includes an awful lot of real estate. That has to be said. Yeah, this is not 600 million for the right to operate the RSL franchise in MLS. That includes the stadium. That's a lot of land and a lot of money. It includes the training ground, which usually training grounds are even more land, less facilities, less money making potential, but a lot of land involved in that. And it includes another stadium, the smaller 5,000 stadium that RSL's Monarchs, the MLS Next Pro team, plays at. So that's a chunk of money. I mean, you know, we haven't seen the contract. We don't know how much all that real estate is valued at, but you have to subtract that from the 600 million in terms of looking at what is an MLS team worth.
Can I also throw in, Simon, that the NWSL team, is that part of the package as well, the Utah Royals?
It is. So the Utah Royals are included in that package. Now, how much is that worth? If you look at what Denver paid for their expansion fee, it was somewhere between 100 and 125 million. Various reports on that. So let's say 100. Let's go low end on it. That's 100, the valuation of an NWSL franchise at the moment in terms of an expansion fee. David Blitzer, who bought RSL just less than 3 years ago, who's now selling his majority ownership in the club, sold it. He actually was able to reactivate that NWSL franchise for $2 million. So if you know, that's a good little bit of business he's done there. That's for sure.
So the group that buys this package is Miller Sports and Entertainment, also owners of the Utah Jazz. You know, that is this thing about the $2 million for the Utah Royals and you know, the Blitzer, and obviously if you go back in the history of this club, they had the Delory Hansen situation was kind of unfolded quickly, and maybe that the club was originally sold then at a cut rate because of how that all went down. I don't know how you see that, Simon. This is also, if I'm not mistaken, the smallest market in Major League Soccer, if not the smallest, one of the smallest. So yeah. How do we pick apart what the valuation of this MLS team is when we know that down in San Diego they're paying $500 million to get into the league?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, the valuations around RSL before the sale, the things that come out in the likes of Forbes and Sportico and those big numbers that generate a lot of excitement in the league office is the RSL in Forbes was around 500 million valuated at. So it doesn't seem actually that far away from it. You know, for a team, yes, taking into account all that real estate and the women's team, but it's not miles away. I mean, it's not 600 million in that sense, but it's a decent valuation of them, I think, really. The comparison, you know, I've been skeptical of MLS valuations, and you know, you hear people say, and I've said it, the only real valuation that counts is what someone's willing to pay for it, right? Well, this is what they've paid for it. They've paid 600 million. It includes the stadium, but the stadium is part of the club. It's not like it's some extraneous add-on retail park or something. It's part of running a soccer club. I think what it does raise questions about is how much are MLS franchises that don't own real estate, don't own their own stadium, how much are those worth compared to the very high valuations that we've seen emerge over the last year or so?
Keeping current events in this, do you think that the changing of the landscape, the proposal of perhaps a calendar change or even different leagues going with maybe adopting promotion and relegation, do you think that that would impact valuations of MLS sides moving forward?
No, I don't think so. I mean, possibly the calendar switch could impact some teams, and there's an uncertainty there at the moment, isn't there? Because what does it mean for Minnesota and Toronto FC if that goes ahead? We're all presuming that there'll be contingency plans put in place so that those teams play on the road in the south of the USA for a lot of the winter. But it clearly is going to impact their business in some way. So you would think that risk factor would be calculated in. The USL Pro Rel stuff, I don't really see impacting MLS's valuations. No, I mean, it may, you could argue it adds some confusion to the market in general. I would say if you were looking for some external factor that might impact it, the possibility of foreign leagues playing games in the US market,
Yeah.
that is something that if I was an investor, I would be a little bit concerned about, at least.
Are we talking about a difference? We're just talking, look, I own a home, Simon. I'm lucky enough to have bought before things kind of went crazy in the area that I'm in. The houses I was looking at were in a certain level. I'm, making a nice living, but I'm by no means wealthy. But just a mile from me, there are houses that, are $2 and $3 and $4 million that I could never even imagine affording. To me, this kind of feels like that when we talk about MLS and USL. You're talking about, people like buying into the San Diego expansion team that are wealthy, and then you have some people that are buying into USL rather, or thinking about USL, who are on a they certainly have some money, but they're not in that same stratosphere.
Yeah, it's the millionaires billionaires dichotomy, really, isn't it? And I think USL, that's their USP. It's affordable to get in, and you spend your money not on a massive fee to get in. You spend your money on building a stadium and building out your club and marketing it to your community and so on. That's USL's USP, and I don't really. That's why I don't really totally understand why they are focusing so much on a Division One league, when really the strength of what USL's doing is in those smaller markets. I mean, it is what's happening in some of those USL 2 and USL 1 clubs. They're the great stories. The small communities that are getting 7,000 or 8,000 turning up, 9,000, 10,000. The AV alters of this world who come along and create something in their community. They're the great stories. And I have confidence in those markets to do really well, and other markets like that. Do I have confidence in USL to go into big markets and compete with MLS? No, I don't really, because when you look at it, yes, they're in Miami, yes, they're in Las Vegas, but look at those two clubs and what kind of attendances they get. So there's the difference between theory and practice there with that. But, I don't think it impacts MLS massively. It would do if they started really doing the Division One league and started moving into MLS markets. That would obviously be a factor.
On your latest episode of The Soccer Business, you welcomed in USL President Paul McDonough. Did he have any comments in relation to what those new small town teams are doing for the leagues?
Yeah, no, he was very bullish, as you'd expect, really, about that, and also about the big teams. The interesting things, the interesting takeaways from it. It's just a 30-minute interview, but he did say that they've had foreign interest since they've made their big announcements. He specifically mentioned German clubs and English clubs, maybe not owning teams, but coming in some sort of partnership or equity role in it. That was interesting. And also, I said to him, look, are you looking mainly at markets that MLS aren't in? Yeah, that seems to be, there's some area of room for growth there, and a lot of people like me who don't take a side in the soccer wars will say great, MLS can't be everywhere, so let's have these teams. And he actually said, there are cities with 7 or 8 million people which could support 2 teams in 2 different leagues, which I thought was a interesting comment.
I'd be curious to know how selective USL will be with those things. If somebody says, if they come in and they say, all right, I've got 8 figures to throw at you, are they just going to say, sure, go ahead, take your shot? Or are they going to be kind of very careful about where they allow teams to pop up? Because look, if you're selling the idea that this is a lower level of access, it's easier to get in, then it's kind of hard to put up barriers and say, well, no, actually, your idea isn't quite what we want. But you obviously don't want the league to run into a bunch of clubs that ultimately fail. And not everything is rosy. I mean, Loudoun United just got an expose by Pablo Maurer at The Athletic, in which it was, mentioned that the ownership there is not putting money into that club. And maybe that's a specific example because of how that club was born, Simon. But there is still going to be that concern that there will be owners who won't really invest in their teams, and ultimately those clubs could die on the vine.
Yeah, and there's always been this issue, let's be frank, with soccer outside of MLS over the last decade or so, this gap between theory and practice. I remember when the new old NASL came along, and the owners there were saying, we have no salary cap. MLS has got a salary cap. They restrict themselves. We can go out and sign anyone in the world because we're not telling our clubs you can't spend on players. And I was like, great. Let's see who you signed then. Right, Raul came into the New York Cosmos. That created some excitement, and that was it. No one went. Landon Donovan didn't switch from MLS to the NASL because there was no salary cap, right? And there's still too much of that around, Miami FC here, nobody watches them. Like, the only people in the ground, there's like a couple of hundred people. There's virtually no fan base. Las Vegas Lights. Now, of course, we can talk about Louisville. We can talk about Detroit City. We can talk about Sacramento and other clubs that are doing really, really well. But is that the environment? What I want to see is if those teams are going to happen, that they're not Las Vegas Lights and they're not Miami FC, that they're like serious ownership groups. And Paul did say that they're going to do some serious vetting of these people coming in to make sure they've got things right.
Let me come back to the sale of RSL and the situation with Major League Soccer club valuations. I mean, as you said, the club is worth what somebody will pay for it. I think we had a very good, astute message from somebody. The way I think a club valuation is like buying a house instead of buying a business. It's a pricey asset that doesn't make day-to-day money, that can be sold for a profit in 10 years' time, right? It's a real estate investment, but it's not. It's a business that kind of gets treated that way. I mean, certainly that's the case at the top end of the game, right? And sometimes you see people buying clubs and you're like, well, this isn't money making. Why are you doing this? And again, it's because maybe it will grow in valuation as leagues become more popular or broadcast money comes in, and they just want to be attached to something, right? They also want the thrill of being attached to that. Major League Soccer probably has a little bit of that happening, Simon. There is one club that is on the sale block. We know this for a fact, and it's Vancouver Whitecaps. I don't know how unique their situation is. Obviously, the stadium is a concern, but how do you think the RSL sale impacts the Vancouver situation?
I think it's very different because from what I read of the Vancouver situation, they announced a couple of weeks ago, they'd already announced they were up for sale. When they announced they were up for sale, the wording was quite interesting. We sometimes dismiss press releases, but sometimes there are little clues in there. And they were saying they were looking for people who can take them on to the next level. And this ties into something I've heard a little bit around MLS, which is if the league is going to start spending more in the next few years and is looking to do something beyond Messi, which is also big and bringing in big players and so on, then there are certain owners who can't compete with that and don't want to be in that position. Then when Vancouver comes out a couple of weeks ago and said they've got a plan for a stadium, an idea for a stadium, a proposal, and you start to think, okay, are they looking for people to come in and buy a majority or a minority stake in that club to help them finance a big project for their own soccer-specific stadium? It looks a bit like that to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, Simon Evans, thank you so much for joining us once again, recurring guest here on Morning Kick Round. Let the listeners know where they can find your great work.
Yeah, it's I'm at SG Evans on Twitter and Blue Sky, and the soccer business is at thesoccerbusiness.com.
Well, thank you so much. We will keep an eye out for these progressing stories and your great work. Viewers, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, what's going on? Hit subscribe. Join the MK Ultras, the listening group for this fine program. We've crashed through 2,000 subscribers. So that means Jason might just send you some soccer paraphernalia. There's memberships available now, which will get you perks like early access to videos, priority commenting, and more. You can also find us on the social media at MKickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com, or also support us, coffee.com/morningkickaround.